Michelle, today is a really cool episode. What are we talking about?
Oh my gosh. Well, this is going to be a good one, Lindsay. So, we are going to be talking about ambition in the USA and really how the pandemic may have affected things and what that means for the future.
Yes, exactly. Are people losing their sense of motivation at work? Are they defining themselves by other things rather than just what they do for work? Guys, we're going to get into this today. It's a fascinating topic. So let's get started, Michelle. But what should our listeners do first?
Guys, remember to hit the subscribe button on YouTube so that you don't miss any of our YouTube videos.
All right, let's get into it.
Okay.
Hey, Michelle, how's it going? How you doing today?
Hey, Lindsay, I'm good. I'm excited to be on video today. Lindsay, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm excited about the topic that we're talking about, especially the title of the article that we're going to discuss briefly, but the whole concept. I think our listeners are going to really sink their teeth into it today.
Right. Exactly. Oh my gosh. No, I'm excited about this too. You sent me this article, Lindsay. So what brought you to want to say, okay, let's do an episode about this? What interested you in this article?
Just a few weeks ago when I sent this to you, there was kind of a moment where, we had the famous event where Naomi Osaka, the famous tennis player, she opted out of the press conference, right? So that was talked about in the news of Wimbledon, I think it was, or was it the French? It was the French Open, I think. She opted out of that, and other, there's just a convergence. It's a moment right now where actually a lot of people are quitting their jobs. I don't know if you've heard about that, Michelle. On the news, a lot of places are struggling to hire, and a lot of people are rethinking the way they approach work. And they're prioritizing like life. And I think it's due to the pandemic. We've kind of gotten a wake up call, like, okay, this is what matters, my family, my home, whatever. And they're just quitting their jobs. I don't know if this is a temporary thing or whether it's a permanent cultural shift.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. This is very, very interesting, and it'll be interesting to see what happens in the future. So guys, we're going to talk about this article today and really, get into it, talk about our opinions, our feelings, our thoughts on it. So this is from the New York Times. So it's called, and Lindsay mentioned the title, it's called, "We're Finally Starting to Revolt Against the Cult of Ambition." So that is an interesting title. This was from June 6th, 2021 by Kelly Maria Korducki. So very interesting article, interesting title. So, let's talk about, what does that title even mean, to revolt against the cult of ambition?
Well, I think first, Michelle, we should talk about what the cult of ambition means to us, right? And, in my mind, this is so cultural. Granted, like, it's kind of world culture too, but it's so American, the cult of ambition. I think it's partly because of the way our economy is set up, that we praise, we praise innovation. We praise the hustle, right?
We've talked about this, like we've talked about before, like people feeling proud of being busy,
Oh yeah, that's true. That's another angle. That's another way we've come at it for sure. So the cult of ambition is this unspoken norm that we respect people who achieve, who work hard, who make a lot of money, and who we respect innovators. And there's less of a respect. There's kind of a stigma to when you're taking a lot of time off. Historically, there has been, or when it seems like you're being lazy, because historically there's been a stigma towards that when you're valuing life over work. Do you agree with that as an American cultural viewpoint?
I do
Michelle,
agree. I remember when I went to study in London, and I remember there was like a head of the program, and she was talking about cultural differences. And I don't know, maybe people who are in London don't agree with this. I don't know. But they said, like, oh, in Europe, it's more like, what is it? The work to live or live to work. So like, in the US, it feels very much like live to work, right? You live to work, you like, and other places it's more like, oh, you work like so that you can live, it's not your whole life. It's not your whole identity. But I think also like work is so much also in our identity. And some people just want it to be like, okay, I have a job. Like I have that job to pay my bills, and that's it. Right.
And that's fine. And that should be fine. Yeah, it's really interesting though. Since I've moved to Colorado, I've seen that just within our culture in America, in the United States of America, there is some variation in this, right? So going from New York City, where it's all artists or achievers, basically, and then Boston, where so much of your life revolves around your job. What do you do? It's what you talk about when you go out networking. What company, what biotech company in Cambridge do you work for? That's the culture. Versus here, it's completely different. I think maybe it's a little more like Europe, actually. The question, what do you do? They're actually asking you, what sports do you play? They're actually
I would not do well out there.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's not a fit for everyone. It's a good fit for me. The question is, where do you hike? Do you mountain bike? In a way, I thought it would get monotonous and kind of boring, but so far I'm actually rediscovering life. How good it can actually be that people leave work at 4:30 to go mountain biking. People hike on the weekends. They actually value their life a lot more than on the East Coast, I would say. Yeah.
No, it is great. That's really great. Yeah, I do feel like living in the area of the country where I live, like I feel like there are areas of the country where I could live where I would be less stressed, where I would feel that less. And like sometimes, like when I've traveled, I like kind of just, I mean, it's because I'm on vacation, right? But you kind of just like have a different feeling. And no, it is very stressful here on the East Coast and the Northeast. And I mean, I'm from the Washington, D.C. area, and there it's always like, also like, what do you do? Like, and everybody works for the government. And
what
like,
law firm? I heard in D.C. it's like you're either a lawyer or you're in politics, right? Like you're one of the two, or you're a politics lawyer. I don't know. Like,
you work for the government. Yeah. Yep. Exactly. So, I mean, so this article, I mean, it talks about, so what happened with Naomi Osaka?
Yeah, and how does that
not playing with the French Open. So, the tennis player. So she had a large fine, I heard, and they said that she was kind of like almost in trouble because she didn't want to participate in not news conferences, because she felt they were harmful to her mental health. Maybe she got very nervous. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but she, talked about, wanting to prioritize and say, okay, well, I don't like this. Like, I don't have to do it. And then she kind of, I believe the story is, correct me if I'm wrong, that then she kind of got in trouble a little bit. And then she was just like, okay, forget it. I'm not doing it.
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? It's a shift that we're seeing, and it ties in with the work conversation, because for the first time, she's a professional tennis player, right? That's her job. And she's basically opting out of one aspect of work because she's prioritizing her own mental health. I'm not sure what it's like to be a tennis player in those press conferences. It's probably very intense, where especially for women, making comments on someone's look and who knows, like what they're wearing, I'm sure it can be very intense. So we've seen Naomi kind of setting a trend of self-care above work duty in a way.
I mean, do you think that she'll be an inspiration to others dealing with this ambition and stress? Like, do you think people will? Because when I heard that, I was like, wow, like that's great that someone is doing that. I mean, I'm sorry that she was struggling, but I'm happy that somebody in that position with that level, at that level, that people look up to this person, and that person was like, no, I'm saying no to this, Definitely. But the article talked about like how this is a lot about, women, and talked about burnout during the pandemic and mothers. And it talked about this idea that society kind of has this feeling where now it's like, oh, women should be wanting to work more. So like it mentioned things like people like Sheryl Sandberg, or even this idea of like, the girl boss and things like that, where there's all these things where it's like, oh, we have to look up to these people. We have to like be like the very best. We have to be a girl boss and all this stuff.
I hate that term so much. Yeah. It's so condescending. Why not just a boss? Right?
True. Yeah. Good. That's a great question, Lindsay. Yeah. Why not just the boss? I mean, why does it have to be about the gender? But it talks about how, women have a lot to deal with also at home, and it talked about like quote unquote emotional labor, things like the pay gap. It talked about Black and Latinx women having a harder time, having like dealing with these issues the hardest, right? A stress gap, I believe. I mean, so much.
Yeah, there's a lot there. There's a lot to unpack, as we say. That's a bonus word for our listeners today, to unpack. Really good stuff. And then on the other side of things, like it makes me nervous. Like if we lose this orientation in our culture towards achievement, what's going to happen? Like sometimes I wonder about all ears English. The way we've built all ears English is with this sense of like pushing, wanting to build something great and big, right? And what if the priority were just always like a quality of life? I'm just gonna take the day off on a Monday because I don't feel like working today. We never would have built this thing. Right. So I love to just push the other side of things and just for the fun of it.
I totally agree.
The obsession. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree. You can't just, you have to find a balance, I think.
You do.
But I do think that there's something, like when they talked about mothers, I think sometimes there's like a stigma against like stay-at-home moms.
Yeah.
And I've felt that I am not, I work part-time, but I have sometimes felt like, oh, like sometimes I, think, I don't know, I've had stay-at-home mom friends of mine, talk about, their feelings and like wanting to do more. And then you feel pressure to do more. And it's like, well, being a mom, like they say it all the time, like being a stay-at-home mom, like that is a full-time job. And I know that it's cliche, but it's so true. So it's just a shame that I feel like there's almost like this judgment.
Yeah, for sure. That's why
and that's not fair either.
Yeah, I mean, that's why personally, like speaking of like the issues out there in politics, I personally think it would be a much better use of funds if we're going to be raising taxes and spending more government money. Let's spend that money on universal pre-K rather than canceling student debt. I personally think that. Maybe that's a hot take, meaning a controversial take, but let's imagine if every kid in the country could go to free universal pre-K. Imagine what that would free up the mother to pursue her career if she wants to, or take the day off, whatever, and have that head start that every kid deserves to have. If we can't do everything.
The thing is, but preschool, I guess it would be complete universal childcare, because pre-K, like, a kid's like already 3, really, by the time they can go to that pre-K. And there are years before that. And I mean, this is a whole other, this is bringing it more into the mother thing, which we can do more another time. But in general, like, it's this pressure of like, oh, I have to show that I can do this. Like I always have something to prove. And that's, so I do think that there should be a balance where you're right. Like if you want to accomplish something, if you have a goal, like that's great, and work hard to achieve that goal. But like, guess what? It's also, if you like want to kind of just like maintain your life in a certain way, and you want that kind of a job, or you want to say no to something, that like, I don't think that there's anything wrong with, I think, instead of being like, oh, we have to like, do this and do that and show we can do this and that. It's like, sometimes people just want to say like, okay, I'm happy with like making a certain amount of money. That's my goal. And then I want to just leave work, not think about it. And,
Yeah. I mean, it's fundamentally unhealthy when we're defining ourselves by anything outside of who we are, right? Outside of ourselves, like our work, our job, how much money we make, even who our friends are. It's unhealthy if we define ourselves based on those things. Right. Like we have to, I think it comes down to, on kind of a spiritual level, how do we define ourselves? Where does our identity come from? And as our culture is kind of hopefully dropping a little bit of this cult of ambition, as the New York Times says, maybe we need to search deeper for that self-identity. Like, who am I and where does it come from? It doesn't come from my work. It doesn't come from my salary. Where does it come from? And at least we'll have a little more time to explore that.
Right. And I just want to say an interesting quote from the article. So they said, quote, as much as you might love your work, work won't love you back.
Yeah, I love it.
So you might love like, the people you work with it. It says it's not the same as like your family. And I think that that's, something that people should reflect on. I know certain like workaholics and things like that that end up, and again, some of it is out of necessity and some of it is because you love what you do. And like all of those things are okay. But I think it's just also okay, again, to be like, okay, my number, like it's not my whole identity, as much as I might like it, as much as I, like when, but there's more to me than like, oh, what do you do, when people ask that, That's what I mean.
Exactly. Yeah, I completely agree, Michelle. And, I just read a book called Shorter, and it's about the 4-day work week. The trend, this goes in line with this same concept
Yeah.
in the United States, actually in Scandinavia. There's a lot of the case studies are actually in Scandinavia, but the trend of just working a 4-day week, having your whole team just work that 4-day week, and then more work gets done. Better work gets done because we have to prioritize all of a sudden. And then we take Fridays and enjoy the day, build our community. So that's a real concept now that's catching the trend a little bit.
Yeah. I mean,
So,
I think that that's great. I think sometimes you might accomplish more by having, I mean, yeah, it's just, so I also have friends who like, I have a different kind of job, but or in past jobs where you're just like staying till 5, like just because you have to fulfill the certain amount of hours, and you might have finished all your work. And I don't understand that.
Oh man, yeah, and this is cultural too. I know that there are other cultures that you need to stay until your boss leaves, or historically you have, right, in those cultures. Oh man, yeah, this is guys. So we want to hear what you have to say about this. This is good stuff. Maybe we'll have an Instagram update or a place for you guys to come to comment on this and join the conversation. Big topic. We're gonna have to come back to it another day, Michelle.
Oh my gosh, no, we could do like a whole series on this and like
for sure
continue it. I have so much more to say. There's a lot, but I mean, Lindsay, like what other any final thoughts?
I mean, life changes, right? Values change in a culture. And it's my final thought. The takeaway today is more of a question, right? In American culture and in the world, is this going to be a permanent shift of values? Or is this a temporary blip where we just had a pandemic? We're coming out of it. We're reworking our priorities.
People are feeling a little,
Exactly. But are we going to end up back into the mold of how American culture has been throughout the industrial age up until now? Or are we moving in a new direction where there are different values and different things are important? That's the question that we're in.
It will definitely be interesting to see how this affects work life long term.
Yeah, really good stuff, Michelle. So we'll check back in on this and maybe next year, and we'll see what's happening in the trends in society.
That's right.
Then
It will be interesting to see.
All right. I'll talk to you soon. Have a good one.
All right. Bye, Lindsay.
Bye.